You know that feeling. You spend ages crafting the perfect post, you hit send, and then nothing. Crickets. It's just this frustrating, almost mysterious feeling like your content just disappears into some digital void. So are you really being seen online, or is something maybe something subtle going on behind the scenes? Today we're doing a deep dive into something social media users talk about constantly: shadow banning. It's this term you hear everywhere describing a way your content might be, well, disappearing online. It can really leave you feeling unheard.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we've gathered quite a bit of material, articles, research papers, lots of user reports too. We're aiming to really unpack what shadow banning actually is, how it seems to work, why it's become so controversial, and what it means for how we all communicate and find information online these days. Our mission really is to cut through the noise, all the speculation, and give you a clear, solid understanding of this often debated practice.
Okay, great. So let's unpack that term shadow banning. We hear it thrown around so much. What exactly are we talking about here? How is it really different from, say, getting a straightforward ban or having your account suspended? At least then you know you've been kicked off, right?
Right. That's the key difference. At its core, shadow banning, or whatever you want to call it, is when a platform subtly limits how visible your content is. And the crucial part, they do it without explicitly telling you. No notification, nothing. So you, the user, can still post, you can still interact, maybe comment, but your actual reach, the number of people seeing your stuff, drops significantly. It's almost like you're put in invisible mode. Sometimes only you can see your own posts properly, which is, like you said, totally different from a direct ban where the platform tells you, hey, you're suspended. You know it immediately.
That feeling you mentioned earlier, content vanishing, that sounds exactly like this, but without any reason given. Very frustrating. So if you are in this invisible mode, how would you even figure it out? What does a user typically experience?
Yeah, it's like trying to spot a ghost, isn't it? The main difficulty is the lack of notification. But you'd start noticing things, specific things, like maybe your posts suddenly stop appearing in hashtag searches, or they barely show up in your own followers' feeds. Comments you leave might be invisible to everyone else. And the big one is usually a sudden, completely unexplained drop in engagement, likes, shares, comments, all of it. We've heard stories, people think their Wi-Fi is broken or something.
Right, you troubleshoot everything else first.
Exactly. Only to eventually realize, no, the posts are just not getting seen. That sudden, drastic drop in engagement or maybe follower growth just tanks. That's often the only clue. And some studies we looked at indicated that for pages affected, visibility can plummet by staggering amounts. We're talking 93 to 99%.
Wow, 93 to 99%, that's huge. It really shows how effective and how hidden this can be. So, okay, if platforms are doing this, they must have some reason, right, or at least an official reason they give. What's the justification for this kind of filtering?
Well, the platforms, they often say their reasons are, multifaceted. But it generally boils down to trying to foster a safer, more positive online space. They claim these techniques are used to manage content that violates their rules. Stuff that's spammy, abusive, maybe misinformation or hate speech. Also things like automated bot activity or users who repeatedly break the rules. The argument is that reducing reach is a way to discourage bad behavior without just banning accounts outright. Because, banned users might just pop up with a new account anyway.
Okay, those goals, safety, stopping abuse, they sound reasonable enough on the surface. But I guess users aren't always convinced. The real controversy seems to ignite around the lack of transparency, doesn't it? That's where it gets really interesting and contentious.
Absolutely. That lack of transparency is a massive issue for many people. Platforms almost never openly admit, yes, we shadow banned this specific account. And crucially, the exact algorithms, the specific criteria they use to decide who gets limited and why, that's all kept under wraps. It's a black box. And this opacity, it just fuels accusations of bias, of censorship, of platforms not being accountable, especially when users feel their content is suppressed because of, say, their political views or because they're discussing controversial topics. There's also this idea, backed by some research, that these hidden moderation techniques can be quite powerful, potentially manipulative even, subtly shifting opinions or maybe increasing polarization by quietly muting some voices and amplifying others, all while looking neutral on the surface.
That's a really significant point. The name itself, shadow banning, is pretty evocative too. Is that the only term? Or does this practice go by other names? And where did the idea even start?
Yeah, the name really paints a picture, doesn't it? And no, it's not the only one. You also hear terms like stealth banning, hell banning, ghost banning. Comment ghosting is another one. As for shadow ban, the term itself seems to have popped up around 2001. It's thought to have originated with moderators on the website. Something awful. Back then, it specifically meant this kind of deceptive ban on forums where you thought you were posting, but nobody else could see it. A bit different from today's broader meaning.
Right, because the concept has definitely evolved. It started with hiding all content from others, but by, say, 2022, the term was being used much more broadly. It applied to things like just delisting your content from search results or significantly downranking it in feeds, not necessarily making it completely invisible.
Okay, so it's evolved. Can you give us some specific examples? Where has this kind of thing actually been reported or observed out in the wild, according to the sources? Sure. There have been documented instances. For example, back in 2015, Twitter was found to have essentially shadow banned tweets that contained certain leaked documents in the US. They just didn't show up in searches. Then in 2016, WeChat was found to be blocking posts and messages with certain keyword combinations over 170 keywords, actually, again, without telling the user. And Instagram is another platform where users frequently report sudden drops in reach, often suspecting it's linked to content the platform deems, let's say, borderline or inappropriate, even if it doesn't trigger an outright removal.
So these aren't just rumors, there are concrete examples.
Right. They highlight a pattern across different platforms over the years.
It really sounds like shadow banning might just be one outcome, maybe the most noticeable one, of a much bigger, more complicated system platforms use to manage content flow. What are some of the other ways they control or throttle engagement, even if they don't stick the shadow banning label on it?
That's a great point. And what's fascinating here is that often what users call shadow banning is really the observed effect of these complex and usually opaque algorithmic and moderation systems working together. We can break down the methods platforms use into roughly four broad categories. First, and maybe the most common and subtle, is algorithmic deprioritization or ranking. Basically, the algorithms are built to show users content they think they'll engage with most. So if your content doesn't hit certain marks, its distribution just naturally gets limited. What kind of marks? Well, things like low initial engagement. If the first few people who see your post don't interact, the algorithm might decide it's not very good and show it to fewer people. Or content type preferences. Maybe the platform is pushing short videos right now, so your text post gets less reach. Also, user history. If someone hasn't liked your stuff before, the algorithm might be less likely to show them your new posts, and freshness, newer stuff often gets pushed more.
Okay, so that's just the algorithm doing its regular job. But it can feel like a ban if your content consistently doesn't meet those hidden criteria.
Exactly. Then the second category is content filtering and moderation systems, which can lead to what you might call soft penalties. These are automated or semi-automated systems checking content against the rules. If something is borderline, maybe a bit spammy, too promotional, mild swearing instead of taking it down, the platform might just quietly reduce its visibility. There's also automated spam detection looking for patterns like posting too much, stuffing keywords, weird links. Triggering those can limit your reach. Some platforms might even give accounts internal quality scores based on past behavior, and a low score means automatic deprioritization. And hashtag or keyword suppression is another one. Using certain flagged terms can mean your post just won't show up in searches for that term.
Right, so automated checks leading to less visibility, not necessarily a human deciding to ban you.
Precisely. Third, there's algorithmic nudging and echo chamber effects. Now, this isn't direct throttling of your content, but it limits who sees it. Think filter bubbles. The algorithm shows people more of what they already like, which naturally limits the reach of anything outside their usual interests. Your content might just not make it into certain bubbles. And there's the flip side. Amplification versus suppression. Platforms often boost highly engaging content, which can sometimes be sensational or polarizing, and that naturally pushes down other, perhaps more nuanced material.
So the very design of the feed can limit reach.
Yes. And finally, the fourth category is more technical. Rate limiting and API restrictions. These are limits on how often very active users or people using third-party apps can post, interact, or pull data. Platforms say it's to prevent abuse or manage server load, but the effect is it throttles high-volume users or certain types of automation.
Wow, okay, so shadow banning isn't just one thing. It's more like the tip of the iceberg, the visible result of all these different hidden mechanisms working together.
That's a good way to put it. It's the cumulative effect of multiple layers of control, often invisible layers, that subtly shape what you see and who sees you online. Less a simple ban, more like navigating a complex maze designed to manage visibility.
So what does this all mean then? For content creators, for businesses, even for regular folks just trying to connect or share information, that drop in visibility you mentioned earlier sounds like it could be absolutely devastating.
Oh, it has really significant implications, yeah. A big, unexplained drop in engagement, that can be crippling for influencers, creators, small businesses. Anyone whose livelihood really depends on that social media reach. If your content isn't seen, it can't drive traffic or sales or build awareness, it hits the bottom line hard. And
Mhm.
even for individuals, it's just deeply frustrating, right? Feeling like you're shouting into the void, like your voice is being silenced without any explanation. It definitely erodes trust in the platform.
Absolutely. So given this really complex, often murky landscape, what can people actually do? If you suspect you're being, well, shadow banned, or maybe more accurately, algorithmically suppressed, or even better, what steps can you take to try and prevent it from happening in the first place? Is there any way to navigate these hidden controls?
It's tough, but there are some practical things you can try. First and foremost, the best defense is probably a good offense. Strictly follow the platform's rules and community guidelines, read them carefully, be really mindful of the content you post, avoid stuff that's clearly harmful, offensive, misleading, or could be seen as spam. Pay attention to hashtags too. Avoid using banned ones or just stuffing posts with tons of repetitive hashtags. That looks spammy to algorithms. And definitely stay away from automated bots or services that promise fake likes and comments. Those are huge red flags for platforms. Engaging genuinely and respectfully with others also seems to help. Platforms often reward authentic interaction.
Okay, so prevention is key. Play by the rules. Be authentic. But what if you still suspect something's wrong?
Right. If you notice that sudden, unexplained drop in engagement, that's your cue to investigate. Monitor your analytics if you have them. If you do suspect you're being suppressed, take a hard look at your recent activity. Did you post something borderline? Did you use weird hashtags? Did you suddenly change your posting frequency? Review and maybe adjust your strategy. If the problem continues, well, the options get limited. You could try contacting platform support, but honestly, getting a clear answer on visibility issues can be challenging.
Understatement of the year, perhaps.
Perhaps some users resort to creating a new account, though that's obviously not ideal. It is worth noting, too, that some platforms, like Reddit for instance, have publicly moved away from traditional shadow banning towards more transparent suspension systems where you were notified. But even then, remember that platforms might deny using the term shadow banning while still employing techniques they call something else, like visibility filtering, which Twitter X uses that ultimately achieve a very similar outcome for the user. Less reach, less visibility.
This has been a really insightful deep dive. We've unpacked shadow banning, or perhaps more accurately, the complex web of visibility controls as this often invisible, definitely controversial form of moderation. It clearly has huge implications for anyone trying to communicate or build a presence online. We've looked at how it seems to work, the reasons platforms give, and those big persistent issues around transparency that really fuel user concerns and that feeling of shouting into the void.
Absolutely. And understanding these nuances, the algorithmic behaviors, the hidden moderation, the visibility filtering, it's just crucial now for anyone using these platforms, whether it's for personal stuff, for business, or just trying to stay informed. And it really leaves us with a pretty important question to think about, doesn't it?
Right.
If these algorithms can subtly shift opinions, if they can amplify certain voices while muting others, and if the platforms operate with such limited transparency around these incredibly powerful controls, what's our responsibility, both individually and collectively? How do we navigate this? How do we push for more open discourse and discern information accurately in this increasingly complex digital world they've built around us?